All right, let's talk more about the French Revolution. So, you remember, we talked in the last video about the Estates General. That's when all three estates get together. That was in May of 1789. I'm not going to do a refresher of everything that happened there. Just remember that was May. In July, so we're May, June, July, 2 months later, July 14th, 1789. Now, no, okay. Sorry, I was going to stop for a minute and start over, but I'm not going to. In May, remember, the National Assembly was made. So they kind of like, these people broke off and said, we represent the people of France. We're starting our own government. And when more nobles and more clergy joined, the king kind of had to be like, okay. But it wasn't very happy with it. July 14th, 1789, Paris. Rumors spread all over the city that the king was sending troops to Paris to like take over, and the king was going to take his power back. They were just rumors, but you know how rumors spread, and everybody believed it. So this huge crowd of people gathered in front of the Bastille. The Bastille was a prison for political prisoners. Political prisoners. In case you don't know what a political prisoner is, it's someone that says something bad about the government. If I break into a store and steal a pretty dress, they might put me in prison, but I'm not a political prisoner. If I say something really, really horrible about the president of Kazakhstan and I'm arrested because of what I said and they put me in prison, I'm a political prisoner. So the Bastille is where the political prisoners were that the king had imprisoned. So it was this great big symbol of the oppression of the king. And people gathered out there, and they also thought that there were weapons kept in the Bastille. People thought it was a weaponry, and they knew it was full of political prisoners. Well, there was this huge like surge of people screaming and demanding to be let in and demanding to get those weapons because the king was sending his army, and the people had to fight the king's army. And the prison guards wouldn't let them in, but they fought them, and they won, and they busted into the Bastille, and they set all the political prisoners free, but there were no weapons. So that day is called Bastille Day. And still today, it is considered the Independence Day of France, because that's the day the king went, oh my goodness, these people are out to get me. So July 14th, 1789, Bastille Day. Now you know the story. You'll hear about it. You will, I promise. Every year on the 14th of July, you'll see on the news somewhere some little thing will say something about, it's Bastille Day in France. Now you can sit and you can tell your parents that story, and they know what Bastille Day is. Okay, so also, shortly after that, I have to remind you, it's 1789 in France. There's famine, people are impoverished, people are starved. Impoverished means very, very, very poor. People are starving, people are watching their own children starve. They're hungry, the streets are full of just hungry people. And then more rumors, because, you know, rumors, You're all high school students. You know how rumors spread. The great fear happens. And this is where everybody starts just believing that they are about to go back to the feudal system. The feudal system is when people belong to property. And the feudal system had never officially been canceled in France. It had just kind of fallen apart and wasn't really working anymore. But there were these rumors, there were great rumors called the Great Fear, that they were going back to it, and that the nobles were going to start charging people money just to live on their land. And it was like crazy. People were breaking into houses where food was stored, and they were taking it, and the whole, like, France is just going wild. And the National Assembly decided they had to act. They were like, we have to do something to bring these people under control. And they got together and they had a meeting, and they officially ended feudalism. They officially, my pen quit working. They officially ended feudalism. And what this really did was it made it so that the nobles were now taxed. That's a big thing. Nobles had never been taxed before. They were all going to be treated equally. The poor person on the street had to pay taxes, but the noble also had to pay taxes. That was big. The nobles didn't get any more special privileges. They were just people. Then there came the Declaration of Rights of Man. And this guaranteed all French men, ladies that are watching this, it was only for men, it wasn't for us, liberty, property, security, I put too many, I can't write that little, resistance to oppression, that's a big one, resistance to oppression, and all men are equal under the law. Sorry, all men are equal under the law. This means that if a noble steals, or a clergyman steals, or a peasant on the street steals, they're supposed to all get treated the same. Now, does any of this remind you of anything? This stuff here, does any of this remind you anything? Hopefully, this reminds you of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution of the United States of America. Hopefully, all of this French stuff reminds you of this, because they really, really, really admired America. The people from the National Assembly really admired that Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And that's what their Declaration of the Rights of Man was based on. Okay, let's see here. What do we need to do next? Aha, yes. Okay, October 5th 1789. Now remember, all of this is happening really pretty quick. Like, we're talking May was the Estates General, where everything fell apart. July was Bastille Day. Now we're at October. October 5th, 1789, there was a women's march. A women's march at Versailles. Versailles, it's a palace. This is where King Louis XVI and his wife, Marie Antoinette, and their children, they all lived. Let's take a sidebar for a second because I want to show you Versailles. First, I'm going to show you how many people lived. This is a common poorhouse at the time. And this is only if you could afford it. If you could afford a poorhouse, you could sleep like this in these little boxes here. This is how many people lived. Then we get Versailles. This is Versailles Palace. This is a picture of the palace from the front. This is a picture of the palace gardens. Where's my picture? This is the inside of Versailles. This is a pretty amazing place. It's taking too long. I don't want to. Oh, here we are. Palace of Versailles. Oh, I thought it was going to show us pictures, but it's not. Yes, here we are. This is inside the palace. This is where King Louis XVI, where did it go? This is where King Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette lived. And this is how your everyday person lived. So you could imagine there was a little bit of tension between, like the poor felt some real animosity towards the king. So let me go back to okay, so it's October 5th. 6,000 women showed up in pouring down rain. It was pouring down rain all day. And 6,000 women still showed up for this march. They marched to Versailles, which is outside Paris. And they were out there screaming on the palace, on the grounds. They were screaming, bread, 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 bread. And this is when the story goes that Marie Antoinette said, well, let them eat cake because they can't afford bread. But so the women are out there screaming, and the king, of course, is probably afraid. The women refused to leave until the king agreed to go back to Paris, because Versailles, they didn't have cars back then. So even though technically today it was pretty close, if you have to walk, it was a far distance from Paris. And the people were saying, we are struggling so hard. Life is so hard for us. And our king doesn't even care about us. Our king has abandoned us to go live this luxurious lifestyle and have parties at his palace while we suffer in the city. So he has to come with us. And because he had 6,000 violent, angry people just about beating the doors down on his palace, he agreed. So the king, Marie Antoinette, and their children went back to Paris, and they lived in their palace in Paris for 3 years, where they were pretty much held as prisoners. They weren't going anywhere. I mean, they lived in luxury. It was a palace, but they couldn't leave it. When the king moved back to Paris, the National Assembly also moved to Paris. The National Assembly had been hanging out in Versailles to be near the king. So now Bastille Day has happened, the Great Fear has happened, the Women's March has happened. Now we're jumping ahead 2 years. Now we've got a new constitution being written in 1791, which is still pretty short. I mean, I understand that you're in high school, you're like 16 years old, and 2 years seems like a really long time to you. But for me, like, I look back on 2 years and I'm like, oh, it's 2 years ago? It feels like it was yesterday. So in the whole scheme of history, 2 years is almost nothing. But the National Convention, the National Assembly in 1791 wrote a new constitution that this one's really big. This is big. It says there is a limited monarchy. Why is that such a big deal, Mrs. Gibbons? Because it has always been an absolute monarchy in the past. In an absolute monarchy, the king's word is final. No matter what the king says, the people have to do it. The king makes all the rules. But now they've got a limited monarchy, and the National Assembly is the other part. Like, the National Assembly makes a lot of the rules, and then the king can, like, kind of do some stuff too. I mean, not kind of, the king can do stuff too, but he's not an absolute ruler with absolute power anymore. Now the National Assembly has rights to make rules too. So kind of seems like the revolution is over, right? We've got a new constitution, the limited monarchy, the king can't make all of his decisions. I don't know. Wait until the next video to find out